Hello everyone, welcome to my channel The Grant Specialist. My name is Chinmay and today I'll be explaining you the guidelines for NHMRC Partnership Projects 2025. As the name suggests, it's all about partnership and translation of your research into deliverable outcomes for health services as well as into health policy. Let's look into it further. In today's session, we'll be talking about the objectives and intended outcomes of this grant scheme, overview of this grant opportunity, key documents and resources, the eligibility criteria, the key assessment criteria. We'll be looking at some outcome snapshots for the past 5 years in terms of what's the performance across the board from the NHMRC's perspective. Then we'll look into a bit of application requirements. What application requirements are there? Because since it's all about partnerships and translation, there are very specific application requirements for this one. It will be very interesting to see what they are. And then we'll look throwing some light onto the checklist for applicants. All right, we'll look into some objectives now. So what are the objectives of this grant scheme? It's primarily the effective integration or translation of the research evidence that you produce out of your research into health policy or health services delivery. The other objective is to create partnerships among the policymakers, managers, service providers, and researchers to together work highly responsibly to the priorities of the government and community and health professionals. The other objective is to provide support to the policymakers, to provide support to answer complex questions and difficult questions that policymakers, managers, and service providers face when making decisions and implementing policies. Also, we are to enable applicants to apply for funding at any given time of the year because since it's about partnership, it takes time for those partnerships to develop. So, I mean, the three rounds usually that are conducted by NHMRC, which is PRC1, PRC2, and PRC3. So it's all about when you get into that right partnership is when you apply. So finding a partner is really critical. There are some eligibility criteria around who can be a partner and who can't be a partner. We'll look into it slightly later in this session. Intended outcomes. What are the intended outcomes? Right. So you need to focus on studies of mechanism of knowledge transfer and exchange, which will lead to improved health outcome for all Australians. Also focus on research involving preventative programs, primary and community health care, hospitals, access to services, workforce infrastructure, and funding. Also applications on existing evidence or application of your existing evidence into developing advice. So you need to look at applications where that translate the evidence into advice. Right? Also need to look into increased reach and knowledge and I need to implement those through partnerships. Right? So the whole purpose or the whole outcome, the whole intended outcome or the objective of this grant scheme is partnerships and translating your research into policy and health services through those partnerships. That is really critical, right? So one key thing to remember here is when you're writing the application, right? NHMRC for this fund scheme is not going to fund something regarding clinical interventions, and things like that. It will be they'll rather focus on projects that are concerned on investigating the impact of system features of health service delivery on health outcomes. Let's say, for example, you're talking about a hospital, right, or a healthcare service. So the planning, the finances, the governance of that healthcare system, how that can be improved to give the desired health outcomes, or to improve the desired health outcomes. So those kind of projects they're going to fund rather than clinical trial where you're actually doing clinical interventions on patients or cohort studies and things like that. A bit of overview of the grant opportunity. It's NHMRC's Partnership Projects 2025. The thing PRC3 is the number in the acronym there is the round for this year. So there are three rounds in 2025: PRC1, PRC2, and PRC3. So this is the third round. So key dates there. It opened in Sapphire on the 24th of July, which means you can start your applications in Sapphire. The minimum data is due on the 12th of November. So please be very aware of this deadline. After this deadline, if you have not initiated your application in Sapphire, NHMRC will not let you start a new application. The scheme closes on the 26th of November. So before the 26th of November, your application must be ready. All the documents have to be uploaded, certified in Sapphire, and your respective RAOs will submit it on your behalf. Coming back to a bit of minimum data, there are specific requirements for the minimum data for this round, which we'll be looking at in the further slides. But be very careful of this deadline and make sure that the thing that you enter or the required fields that you provide response for in the minimum data do not change after the minimum data deadline has passed, because these questions or these responses to these questions NHMRC will use to allocate your application to the right reviewers, right? So be very careful about that. Minor changes are okay, but not significant ones. Project duration, NHMRC will be accepting projects for this particular fund scheme over the 5-year period, 1 to 5 years. The total funding available with NHMRC is 31.6 million, where a maximum of $1.5 million will be provided per application. Now, this is a very critical part of this fund scheme is partner organization contribution, either cash or in kind, has to be equal to the same value that has been asked from NHMRC. Let's say if the NHMR, if let's say a partner contribution for your application is $1 million, however, your budget in the NHMRC grant application is $1.2 million, NHMRC will reduce that budget to $1 million to match the partner contributions. Currently, there are no rules about what percentage should be cash or what percentage should be in kind, but a cash contribution is highly regarded by NHMRC rather than just an in kind contribution. So when you choose your partner or when you're having those conversations with your partner, you know, need to start these conversations quite early on. Right, NHMRC's policy on generative AI, if you have seen our previous videos, I have multiple repeatedly told about this in all my videos, is NHMRC has strict policy on use of generative AI. If something in your application is found to be inaccurate because the AI did not give you the right information using generative AI, it is the CIA's responsibility to check. Also, we strongly recommend not putting your information onto a generative AI platform because it's almost impossible to retrieve information back from that platform. Key documents and resources. So Grant Connect. Grant Connect is a place you'll find key documents uploaded by the funder, which is NHMRC. One is the grant guidelines, which is very critical. These are the guidelines that are given to the applicants to start writing the application. Peer review guidelines are the guidelines given to peer reviewers to review your application. So I'll strongly recommend having a look at those guidelines. Grant proposal template. Have a look at the grant proposal template. This is the template NHMRC strongly recommends you to use when submitting a proposal for your project. The fourth, and the fifth are very specific to the partnership project fund scheme. The one is the AI waiver request form, right? So, as we have seen previously, a partner has to be someone who is a health policy provider or health services organization. Now, these two things do not usually happen at universities or research institutes. It has to be a third entity who is a partner who is going to translate your research into actionable health policy or actionable health service, right? So, if you want an NHMRC administering institution to be a partner, right? That is the form you fill in. It is a responsibility of that administering institution to submit a waiver form to NHMRC and get that particular waiver to be considered as a partner. I've also hyperlinked the list of NHMRC administering institutions, so it will be very helpful for you to have a look at that before submitting that waiver. Partner letter of support. So every partner, and we will have a look at that this later as well. Every partner is required to upload a partner letter of support on the Sapphire portal for this application. NHMRC has provided a template for that partner letter of support to be included on. So please have a look. It has to be on that template, and there are strict rules in the guidelines around that. I strongly recommend any letter of support from the partner must be on that template. Then we have the NHMRC website for resources. That's the NHMRC Partnership Projects website, as well as some peer review resources as mentioned on the NHMRC's website. Application portal for this sort of applications, NHMRC uses Sapphire as its application portal. It would be good to have a look at Sapphire. Start your application there soon. Start your conversations with your partners, with your CIs, the chief investigators. Get accounts on Sapphire as soon as possible. As you know, in the NHMRC won't entertain requests to create new accounts within 72 hours of the application submission deadline. All right, so let's look at some eligibility now. So there are two forms of eligibility, usually the project team, as well as multiple grants held. If you have seen our previous videos, those are the two primary sources of eligibility that we look into. The third form of eligibility for this is the partner's eligibility, right? That is very critical. We'll look into that one as well. CIAs. Let's start with chief investigators and associate investigators. A CIA must be an Australian/New Zealand citizen, permanent resident, or have a valid work visa until the duration of the project. It should not be a scenario where you get awarded an NHMRC partnership project while you cannot complete the project because the visa has expired. The CIA must be based in Australia for at least 80% of the funding period. Up to 10 CIs and 10 AIs are allowed per application. Multiple applications or grants held. Uh, no duplicate applications have to be submitted across different partnership project round unless the outcome of the previous round has been announced. For example, if you're applying for a project in PRC3, right? However, if you have applied for a same project in PRC2, which was the previous round for the partnership projects, and since the outcome of that hasn't been announced as yet, you can't apply for that project in PRC3. However, if you had applied for the same project back in PRC1, the outcomes were announced for that one. So you can apply again for the same or similar project. That's what it means. The holding of the grants, you can hold multiple partnership projects, that's not a problem. However, one FD across all projects for salary can be drawn from NHMRC. Right. Now we'll look into some funding limits. Right. As we saw, the maximum amount of funding that NHMRC will provide per application, per successful application has to be 1.5 billion, which essentially means your partner contributions should add up to 1.5 million in total as well. They can exceed the funds coming from NHMRC. Let's say, for example, you can have partner contributions of $2 million. However, NHMRC is paying $1.5 million on top. That's fine, but it cannot be less than the funding applied to NHMRC, right? That's what it says. So if NHMRC funding exceeds the partner organization contribution, NHMRC will reduce to match the partner contributions, right? In so how do you choose a partner is very critical. Organizations that are contributing to the part to be a partner or contributing, giving partner contributions have to be benefiting from the project as well. It's not just okay if there's an organization around where you live. Oh, they can be a partner. I know this guy really well. Let's bring them on as a partner. No, it doesn't work like that. It has to be a translatable sort of thing, right? So your research has to be translated into a health services research or health policy. So someone from those areas would be really helpful. Uh, a partner organization that are not contributing anything would not be considered as partners. So I think they have to contribute some sort of either cash or in kind if they are involved, if they are being involved in the project, because they should be getting substantial benefit out of the project as well, right? You can have government, state or state government contributions. I mean, those specific areas of government and state government contributions, like a government hospital or a public health service, yes, right? But however, cannot draw sort of those contributions from other government or commonwealth sources like NHMRC, like MRFF and ARC. It can be from a government hospital and things like that. That's okay. Right. Who can be partners? This is interesting. Right. Organizations whose decisions are affecting public health, health policy, or health care delivery in a way to improve health services for Australians are organizations that can be partners who have substantial decision making, whose decisions have an impact on policy or have an impact on health services can be partners. Those institutions include someone working in federal, state, or local government, can be an organization in a private sector, right? A private health insurance provider or private hospital. Yeah, it can be a non-government organization or charity. It can be community organizations, such as a consumer group. Can be a healthcare provider. Can be a professional group. You know, so partnership with overseas partners are acceptable provided the objectives of the grant are met, right? So it can be an overseas partner coming on board. That's fine. They can provide some contributions as well. That's absolutely okay. They're acceptable. However, it has to meet the goal of your partnership project, right? Or your part of or this partnership project fund scheme. The partner. So when you're including partners in your application, the quality of the partner or the eligibility of a partner will be assessed, right? Based on or will be assessed by the partnership project peer review panel, which is the PRPs, right? So they'll assess the appropriateness and the value of the partnership. So this is very critical to understand, which means you have to choose your partners wisely. You have to choose your partners in a very appropriate manner. Give it a lot of thought. It's not just having somebody as a partner. Think about it and then bring them on. Right. Who cannot be partners, right? A research translation center or a partnership center cannot be a partner. Any organization who is academically led rather than a service-led organization cannot be a partner, right? So for an RTC, one of their service delivery agency who is directly delivering the health service to patients, to Australian population, can be a partner, or they might be a policy agency or an agency that directly impacts public policy or health policy, yes, they can be a partner, but not the center itself. Yeah? All right, let's look at some key changes from the last rounds. The threshold score for fundable application has changed. It was slightly lower before, but that has now gone up. Look at section 8.1.2 and appendix B. The score descriptors for assessment criteria 3 have changed to improve alignment to each score. What are score descriptors? Score descriptors are marking rubrics that are provided to the peer reviewers or reviewers of for your application. So if you have been teaching before, if you're involved in teaching, you know how the marking rubrics work. So it will be very important for you to have a look at those marking rubrics before you start writing your applications, because that will be very critical and that will inform you in terms of what the assessor is looking for under each assessment criteria for an application. And that's given in Appendix B of the guidelines. Partner contribution guidelines has been updated as well to clarify the guidance on cash and in-kind contributions. As I said, we don't have any limits or any rules around what percentage should be cash or what percentage should be in-kind. But as I said, a cash contribution is highly regarded by NHMRC in contrast to in-kind contribution. Grant proposal requirements have been streamlined to reduce the burden on applicants and peer reviewers. So grant proposal sort of sections have been updated to make sure that it has a right flow. The peer reviewers and the sort of applicants feel less burden in terms of addressing the assessment criteria across each sections of the grant proposal. All right, let's look at some assessment criteria. If you look here, there are 4 assessment criteria for this fund scheme, and they are equally weighted across 100%. So each assessment criteria is 25%. The first assessment criteria looks into track records of chief investigators, partner investigators, and partner organizations. Right. So this is all about how good the team is, how good the partners are, how good the partner investigators are. The second is about scientific quality of the proposal and methodology. It's all about the project itself. So the proposal itself, what you're trying to achieve with the project. The third is about relevance and likelihood to influence health policy. So this is very important. It is all about your research, but the quality of it. Is it innovative? What's happening there? What sort of likelihood does it have to impact the health policy? And that also depends on what quality of partners you have, who's the pro health policy provider. So that's very critical to address as well. So that assessment, right, that those 25% will determine how your application is going to perform with the peer reviewers, right? And the last one is about strengthening strength of partnerships. What sort of track record you have with the partners? Are the partners contributing? Has the proposal been developed in alignment with partnerships or with the partners and so on and so forth? So if we look at a broader picture of the four assessment criteria, it's all about partnership, partner organizations, relevance to relevance to translate into health policy or health services through a partner, that is, of course, and then again the strength of partnership, right? So that 55% is dedicated to partnerships. So as I said before, focus on getting the right partner, and that is very critical. All right, the first one, track records of chief investigators, partner organizations and partner investigators. Now it is a record like for chief investigators, it is expected that you have an excellent track record, the record of working successfully with the policymaker. You have previously worked with the policymaker, right? So you have been previously working in a healthcare service or a hospital, right? You have understanding of clinical policy, health policies. You have other related service, service related achievements. You have had a lot of publications and books written, or government reports written into peer-reviewed journals and so on and so forth. So that track record relates to individual chief investigators, right? Now, partner investigators. Now, partner investigators are those people who you nominate from the partner's side to be working on the project, right? So when you're writing your application in Sapphire, when you enter the partner details, they'll ask you for a name of the person from a partner, right? So how are they assessed, right? It's about experience and authority to support that partnership. Do they have that, right? Evidence of it. Does that person from the partner side has shown leadership capabilities before? Do they have experience in translating research findings into policies or health services, right? Do they have evidence of successfully implementing a change in their organization, right? So that name is very critical to choose the partner's side as well, right? In your application, you can actually give that partner investigator or role as a chief investigator or an associate investigator in your application. So if that's the case, then that investigator will be assessed across two criteria. One is as a chief investigator or associate investigator, as well as a partner investigator. So be very careful on whom you include as a CI or an AI, right? But it's very easy to think that okay, if this person becomes a CI on my project, that gives the reviewer a better understanding of a good partnership or that translation being easier because they're working on the project itself. No, that's not the case. Right? So think about that. The second assessment criteria will be scientific quality. This all relates to clarity of the hypothesis and aims, right? What are the strengths and the weakness of the experimental design? It's all about feasibility of your work, right? What commitment have you demonstrated towards service delivery, right? Is the research actually focusing on translating evidence into policy or health services practice and so on and so on? Is this research addressing gaps? Is also what they're looking into. The third one, which is critical as well, which is relevance and likelihood to influence, right? This is very critical. The things that you should be addressing in this criteria are they are or the reviewers are looking off when they're reviewing this assessment criteria is, are the aims innovative? Are the concepts innovative? Do your concepts yield new methods or new knowledge? Right? does the project have the potential to significantly contribute health policy, right? Is the partner organization involved in your research capable or have the capacity to use these findings and translate them, right? Does the application address issues which are of national and regional significance? So these things, so likelihood of influencing policy and practice will only be high when your project is innovative, right? Or there is it's yielding new methods. There's something sensational about it, which is then helping it influence policy and practice. So that is something that is required in this assessment criteria, right? And the fourth assessment criteria is the strength of the partnership. This contributes to 25%, right? The one thing that they're looking at is the extent to which the application demonstrates the capacity to develop a strong partnership, right? So it's not a tokenistic thing there. It has to demonstrate that okay, this a long-term partnership or a big partnership with bigger contributions and things coming in. Is there evidence of co-development of the proposal? Does the cash or in-kind contribution come from the partner? What are the roles of the people in the partner organization? Right? So if somebody is a partner investigator, as we saw previously, do they have capacity? Do they have leadership roles? Do they have experience with translating and things like that, right? Does the partner have previous experience in developing working relationships, right? Is the proposed governance there with the partner, right? How will the team foster and maintain collaborative approach between researchers and decision makers? So these are the things that they'll be looking for in terms of the strength of the partnership. So these four assessment criteria, 25% each, out of which out of 100%, if you look at it very deeply, about 55 to 60% is all about partners and partnerships. Be very careful in choosing them. Now, the assessment process, as we have seen previously as well, the peer reviewers will independently undertake an assessment against the assessment criteria. Once that assessment is undertaken, they'll mark based on the score descriptors and the overall scores of the shortlisted applicants will be used to develop a rank on which funding recommendations will be made. Applications with an overall score above 4.5 and a mean score of 4 in each assessment criteria are potentially fundable subject to the availability of funds. So I mean not all applications who meet the score criteria get funded. It depends on what funding is available as well. All right, so let's look at some outcome snapshots from the past 5 years. If you look at the average success rates in 2020, it's about 50.9%. Then it went down to 33.3%, then 31.2%, 29.8% in 2023, and goes back again in at 36.8% in 2024. Now, there's a reason we say that it's an average success rate because, as you know, every year has about two or three partnership projects now. So, these 2020, if you're looking at 2020, in 2020, whatever outcomes for partnership projects were announced, that success rate is based on that. So it might be from 2019 PRC3 announced in 2020, that is considered in 2020, not 2019. Right? And that's why it's an average one. Now let's look at some application numbers and the award numbers that constitute or that inform that success rate, right? So in 2020, the applications submitted were 55, out of which 28 were awarded, which makes it about 50.9%. 2021, the total applications across ERC 123 or outcomes received in that year, total applications was 93, out of which 31 were funded. It was a little low, it was a significant drop. In 2022, similar sort of situation, 31.2%. 77 applications were submitted, out of which 24 were funded. 2023, we have 29.8%, on for which 47 applications were submitted and 14 were awarded. Last year, we had 68 applications submitted, out of which 25 were awarded, which got it up 36.8%. Right? So let's look at some absolute success rates. So Let's look at PRC1, PRC2, PRC3 across each year. In 2020, it was 30.3% for PRC1, 34% for PRC2. There was no PRC3 in 2020. 2021, 38.5% for PRC1, 23.8% for PRC2, and 30.8% for PRC3. 2022, we have 41.2, 37.5, and 25.8% respectively for PRCs 1, 2, and 3. 2023, there was no PRC3, so PRC1 and PRC2 almost had similar success rates, 35.3 and 35.5. It was very near. Last year, 2024, 66.7% was PRC1, 57.1% was PRC2, and 50% was PRC3. So, having a look at the trend of success rates is quite important in partnership projects. Yes, now application requirements, minimum data. Again, this is the information that's highlighted in your guidelines with a or in application itself with a blue color flag towards the end of the question. So those are all the fields that are required for minimum data. If you look at the first one, application packet, that's the one thing that's not denoted by a blue flag, but that is required for a minimum data. Right? So make sure you please address all these questions and answer all these questions before the minimum data deadline. If you go beyond minimum data deadline and these questions are not answered, the application will be deemed ineligible and you won't be able to start a new application. Right? Grant proposal. I've hyperlinked the link to the grant proposal template there. The template for a partnership project includes introduction. It's about introduction to the project. You need one page for that. Then we have 8 A4 pages. It's all about research proposal, the scientific quality. It's the second assessment criteria, team quality and capability and relevant to this proposal. And that's the first assessment criteria. You have one A4 page to address that. And we have CI track record, which is another 2 pages per CI to answer that. And section E as well for associate investigator and their contribution. So section C, D, and E are related to the first assessment criteria, and then we have references, right? So the references is maximum 2 pages. Make sure that the grant proposal template is followed when writing the proposal. In your top 10 publications, you nominate the top 10 publications from the past 10 years. You have one explanation section, explanation box to explain all the 10 publications. When you're explaining the publications, please put in your role as an author, how the publication contributes to the research that you're proposing, and what sort of translation activities have happened in the previous publications. In the citation fields, do not include anything except the citations there. Please be consistent with the format for citations. If you're going with Harvard, go with Harvard across all the 10 publications for each CIs. Right? One thing to remember, you can use FWCI indexes but not journal matrices in your explanation section. Partner organization details. So as we know, partner organizations are really critical, right? In the partner organizations, you have to list the name of the partner, their contributions, the name of the person from the partner's side. Are you willing to give them a role as a CI or AI? Yes or no? You know. Then there are two additional questions this year that NHMRC has included, which is state the research question or the problem that the practice or policy partner needs answered or solved. So, which is coming from the requirement that the partner or the health services provider should be benefiting from this project as well. So, if they're benefiting from this project, that is what they're asking. So, what question do you want this research to solve for you? Right? The second one is how does the partner expect to use the outcome of this research? So those two questions are interrelated. So what question do you want the research to answer for you? And once that research question is answered, how will you use that research question in your work? Or how are you going to use that information? Right? For every partner organization you list, please add a letter of support, upload an annual report, or have a URL to the annual report there in the URL just under the URL section, right? As I said, assign additional roles if you're giving them as chief investigators. Also, add contributions from each partner's third-party research facility. You select yes to this question if you have a third-party research facility in mind that you'll be using their services for to conduct research. If you say yes to that question, there'll be another box that pop up that requires you to add formal order letter of the service provider. All right, in the budget development, right? So we'll look into some partner contributions and what NHMRC will match and what NHMRC will not match, right? So payments to new staff. So if a partner is contributing cash to recruit or employ new staff to work on the project, yes, NHMRC will match that contribution. However, if the partner is contributing cash to pay for a salary of a CI or an AI, NHMRC will disregard that as a partner contribution, which means NHMRC will not add a total of that equivalent amount to the amount they are funding, right? So that's very important to understand. Uh, Direct research costs only. So if, for example, a partner is contributing cash to conduct project or the other research costs and things like that, yes. If they're contributing money to buy a non-essential equipment for the research, NHMRC is not going to match it again. So it's very important why the money is coming in for, right? Partner investigators, if the partner organization is paying the partner investigators, that's fine, no problem. If they are contributing cash to pay the investigators, no issues. However, if they are giving money to pay salaries for chief investigators and associate investigators, NHMRC is not going to allow that. So if a partner is giving money to pay CIs or AIs, NHMRC is not going to allow that. Be very clear on that. So that funding coming from the partner has to be used for a very specific purpose, right? Look at some rules around in-kind contribution, right? So if they're contributing in kind, right, that's fine. So salary support for partners, that's fine. They can be named as a CI or an AI, and they are, if a partner investigator is named as a CI or an AI and they are contributing in kind to pay them, that's fine. If it's in, if it's about access to databases which are not in the public domain, if it's an internal cost of access, that's fine. If NHMRC is not going to match cost for collecting the database, they're not going to do that. So it's about internal cost of access, they're happy to match it. Analytical and other services. So if there's a service provider that you're using, they're going to match the price for internal sort of service provision rates, not the commercial rates, right? So be very aware of that. Equipments and materials, yes, they'll match the market value of the items, you know, that are used only for research. They won't be, matching the development cost of that equipment or the discounted listed price. Now, they'll imagine the market value of that item. Patents and licenses. So licenses acquired from third parties for use by research team. Yes, they'll match the cost for that. If it's about patents or licensing acquired from the university, they will not match the cost for that. Salaries and non-salaries, typical salary costs and internal rates. That's fine. External charge out for consultants and things like that, they won't be matching that. Softwares, copying, licensing, documentation costs. If the partner is paying in kind for that, they're okay with that to match it. But development cost of software, they're going to match that cost. Travel costs associated with field work and travel costs to meet the partner organizations. If the partner is contributing that money for that, they're good. Otherwise, they won't be. Use of facilities, if they're providing in-kind contribution to use the partner facilities, that's okay at internal rates, with commercial rates, they won't be funding. So, in your partner letter of support, when you're mentioning the details, the partner contribution, right, be very careful to look at these categories, right? Because if NHMRC says, oh, we're not going to match that because it doesn't fall under the category, which means that component of that partner contribution will be null and voided, which means the total funding that you get from NHMRC will reduce as well. Because as we saw, the partner contribution must be equal to the NHMRC contribution. NHMRC will not be funding you more money than the partner contributions. So having that partner contributions clear, correct, and validated is very critical to have. We'll look at some checklist. Inform your RAO of your intention to submit. Again, ensure that all Sapphire accounts are created. Request, yes, this is important. Contact your RAO and request access to previous successful applications. Be aware of the administering institution guidelines. Check and complete minimum data. Check eligibility requirements at the creation stage. Complete all parts of the application. Create and upload your grant proposal. Identify any relative to opportunity or career disruptions that you might be having, which are applicable to your application. We'll be making more videos on that in the series further. So have a look at that too. Make sure that all the attachments are uploaded. That's very critical in the non-partnership projects. If you have seen our previous videos, the primary attachments there are grant proposal and a third-party research facility letter, if it includes one. But in this, there are multiple attachments that are going to go in. So be very careful of all the attachments. Letters of support is primarily important. It takes a lot of time to get it because it doesn't depend on you solely, it depends on the partner organization as well. So I would strongly recommend getting onto this as soon as possible. Before submitting an application, check all the compliance requirements are correct. Ensure that any images of people are de-identified. Check, certify application staff and let your RO submit on your behalf. Contact details. If you have any clarifications on guidelines, please email me to NHMRC on help@nhmrc.gov.au. The phone number is 1-800-500-983. If you have glitches with Sapphire, that's the same contact details you have to go to. If you have any questions about eligibility, the best person to contact is the RAO in your institution, right? If you contact NHMRC directly for this, they'll direct that query to your RAO itself, so it's better to reach RAO first. If you need advice in writing an application, the peers in your area of research, the local area funding specialist, and the RAO in your institution can assist. Be very aware on the day of submission, which is 26th of November, after 1 p.m., NHMRC is not going to respond to any queries. Thank you. If you have any questions, please comment down below. If you have liked this video, please like, share, and subscribe to our channel. If you have not watched our previous videos, please go in and watch our previous videos. They're really inspiring. So thank you and look forward to the next one.